My most difficult challenge was raising money. Raising money was really tough for me.
BuyPower is not the only guy in the market. So how have you guys sort of maintained these?
Businesses need to pay more attention to the fundamentals. All financial success anywhere in the world is built by creating value. It's about value creation, value capture. Founders really need to be resilient and adaptable to build a successful business or startup. You have to do two things. You have to build a product or a service that customers want or love. And then the second thing is...
Hello everyone, welcome to Founders Corner. So Founders Corner is one of the breakout sessions that happens during Founders Friday, where we get to invite incredible founders who have built incredible products within that city. So we're right now in the city of Abuja, and we have a founder that started his company from Abuja, and our goal is to uncover that story and to be able to use that to inspire a lot of the founders out of Abuja to build companies that actually are global. So first question, right? If you look back to like when you were a child, like did you see yourself becoming like an entrepreneur at all?
No way. It was never my aspiration to tread on this part of entrepreneurship. I just know that my ambition in school was just always to do my best. I always wanted to be the best I could be in whatever I did. And that's what drove my path to engineering, actually. It was really about trying to figure out how best I could express my talent to the world. Business was really never in the picture. It was like, the way it happened was like, it was like magic, right? I studied electrical engineering, that's my background. I was lucky that early enough, while I was, I think my first or second year in school, I met someone that advised me to get a skill outside of my core competence, which is like electrical engineering. By the time I was third year in the university, I had already done, it was Java certification back in the day, right? I don't know what it is right now. I was the only certified Java programmer in my class. And then I started helping final year students build prototypes for their projects. That was just how my journey in this whole, engineering and technology space, that's how it started out.
You were like the tech guru in school that time. So when you were thinking about, graduating from school, what were you looking at your life? What was that for you?
Essentially, it was just about trying to solve problems. I'm a huge believer in the use of technology to solve local problems. That's problems within the environment. So it was a personal frustration that I had while I was working. I was leading one engineering team here in Abuja.
And this was when?
This was in 2015, around 2015, yeah. After I graduated, I continued to work for that company as an individual contributor. I moved to a different company and then rose through the ranks and became like, a chief technology officer for that company. But what happened was that there was this constant nagging and recurring problem that I personally experienced at the time, which was quite frustrating to me. And it was that, as a software engineer, you have to work hard and you work late, right? You work hard and you work late. And the problem was that most times when you close late from work, I always forget to buy my electricity token. So that was the problem. It wasn't just the fact that I forgot to buy the electricity token. It was because the physical payment centers where you buy those tokens were only open for very limited hours, typically between 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. That means that there are times where you won't have power supply in your house overnight, not because there's no supply in the neighborhood, but because you didn't have access to pay for it. And so at the time, we got thinking that maybe there were other professionals like me that were experiencing the same type of problem. And then it was also the fact that if you go to those physical payment centers on Saturdays, you see these long queues. People have to queue, sometimes under the blazing heat of the sun. And sometimes you even have to tip cashiers to help you expedite processing, right? So this was an obvious problem. At the time, I was kind of shocked that in Nigeria's capital, why wasn't anyone trying to solve that problem, right? So, that's how it all came together for us. But at the time, we weren't thinking of starting a company. We're just trying to solve a problem that we had. Of course, figuring how to do it was quite complex. You're literally starting from ground zero, right? The first hurdle that we had to solve for was, why had no one solved that problem up until that moment, right? Was it based on the technicality of the problem? Was it the scope? Was it politics? What was the driver for that type of outcome at the time? Was it legacy technologies? Was it that they couldn't integrate with external systems? What was it, right? So figuring that part out took, that 8 to 9 months. And then the other part was on the business side, was to figure out how to get a contact within the distribution company that would buy into the idea of the product. Yeah, so it started, and we're able to figure out the second part too. And in April of 2016, we launched the product. Remember, this wasn't a company; it was just a project, right, that we were working on. And then when we launched it, I wasn't taking it seriously, right? When I started taking it seriously was sometimes, I think I woke up one morning and someone had tweeted about the service and said, like, these people are not serious. I think the person had a problem overnight. I was trying to figure out how to get in touch with us. And so, like, for me, I was like, I was telling him that people are actually taking this thing seriously. This wasn't even a company. There was no employee per se. Like, so like, you're dragging us. We're just trying to. So we're just trying to solve a pain point there. So, that was when it became clear to us that we actually, needed to put resources together to actually build the project, not a BuyPower yet. Yeah. The project. Of course, we used our savings at that time. We needed to hire the first employee, customer support, right? Someone to talk to customers and resolve their queries and issues.
That was your first
employee. First employee. So at that time, we didn't have money, right? Like, how do we start this? How do we, go about hiring? So, I didn't even know how to pitch. So I didn't know what pitching was, right? But I just see that I started a business. And then what happened was that by the second month, we had about 10,000 users, right? And then it was obvious that, okay, actually this is very, very serious.
And were you guys making money from the 10,000 users?
Yes. Oh. Like we started monetizing from day one. Actually, we even over monetized from day one.
How did you monetize?
Because we were charging a convenience fee, right? I don't know. I think at the time was it 200 or 300? I can't remember what we started with now. But we're charging a fee per energy event that happened on the platform. So
at that time, like how much?
How much was it? Like it was.
How much, like in total, like every month, monthly recurring revenue?
So at that time it was, let's say it's for 10,000 guys at 200, right? Yeah. Like, oof. So that's what it was at that time. So it's a little bit of money coming in, but we needed to scale it a bit because we were getting a lot of customer queries and we didn't have the right fit for a payment provider. Right. So I think at the time we were using Remit or something. And I still remember back then when I'm so angry with the quality of your service, I tell those guys, like, it looks like the reason why we were created was to frustrate BuyPower. Like, so payment wasn't that seamless.
Could you give an example of some of the issues?
Okay, some of the issues that we have. So one of the issues was that sometimes they'll debit customers and their service wouldn't tell us that it's successful. Right? So if you debit a customer and you don't tell us that it's successful, we can't give value to that customer. Right? And so it's bad customer experience. right? For that's just one out of several issues that was happening at the time. Yeah, so I went out here, Abuja, to start raising money here in Abuja, and I started talking to anyone that would care to listen.
But I'm curious though, like raising money at that time, like what made you think that you could raise money?
That could raise capital?
Yes.
Because it was like the platform had traction. It had traction. There were customers, right? I needed to figure out all these different layers of problems and issues around the service, but I needed competent people to help me navigate that.
And the money,
right?
And the money we're generating was not enough.
It wasn't at the time, because we're paying for our cloud infrastructure at the time. With the Disco integration, we had to pay for some fees, and then it was scaling fast. So as it was scaling fast, we're utilizing more server resources too, right? So it's just like it started exploding, and you're trying to basically achieve some level of stability to keep the service going long term. And then another problem was, I think we had to pre-fund too. We had to pre-fund with the Disco some type of security deposit. So we needed money to get all of that going, right? And so that's, I started talking to all the HNIs, all the HNIs in Abuja. And I just leveraged people within my network, and it was horrible terms after horrible terms after horrible terms.
Give me like 2 examples.
Okay, so there was someone that wanted to give us 6-digit figure.
That's like
for about 85% equity.
Naira. What in the world?
Yeah. Something like that.
It's most likely an old man. Was he a young person?
So that's what I think
Naira.
So at the time it was
was Naira, right?
Yeah, it's Naira. Yeah, Naira, of course. It was Naira. It wasn't so angel investing, accelerators. It wasn't so much of an idea around the time, right? So it was really, really frustrating, right? It was tough, but we kept on going on. What happened? I think the turning point in all of that was I somehow found Paystack, right? And Paystack just got out of YC at the time. And because of the volumes that we're pushing, through them, I got to know the founders, we became friends and all of that. So what happened was that the president of Y Combinator was visiting Abuja at the time. And, someone asked me to just go for the event, right? It's just an event. It was just a random event. So I went. It wasn't like I even went there because I knew I was going to raise money, or it wasn't just. I just went, attended the event, and it was 4 days after the event. I just woke up one morning. I just called my partner and said, I'm going to apply for Y Combinator. I'm going to apply. That was it. So I spent the next, 5 days filling in the form, and eventually I submitted.
And this was 2016?
This was 2016, right?
2016.
It was 2016. We kept on pushing, still looking for how to support the business with outside capital. 3 months in or something, I got an email, and the email was that we were accepted. And I was kind of shocked, right? Let me tell you why I was shocked. So I was shocked because the typical model for YC is that even after your application, they still go through a phase where they interview the founders virtually before you are invited for a physical interview in Silicon Valley, right? So at least that was the experience that most of these founders told me they had. So the fact that we sort of skipped that step for us felt like we put in a strong application, right? Now, when I said I was accepted, it doesn't mean I was accepted into Y Combinator. It meant that we were invited for a physical interview in Silicon Valley. That's what it is. Now, problem number 2, we didn't even have passports, right? So we didn't have passports, we didn't have money to fund the travel expenses, and we didn't have visa. So there are three problems here. So we had to solve for each of these three challenges at the time. So for getting a passport, I think, one of us spoke to our parents and were able to get little help. For travel expense, we had to ask Y Combinator that we don't have money for this thing. So, that time I remember they had to, they used the service, is it Cash Envoy or something like that? So they gave us that virtual card, they put some money in it, and that's what I used to book a flight to California. Now, there's not the visa part too, right? So visa part, I started talking to please, who can help us get visa? It was sort of short notice, and we had to figure out a way to solve that problem. So eventually, we were able to navigate that problem. For me, it was almost like a miracle the way that thing happened, but it did happen. We got visa, and then here we are, going to Silicon Valley to face the toughest 10 minutes of our life at that time, right? Because Y Combinator is like the Ivy League of startup accelerators, right? It has like a 1 to 2% acceptance rate. So the chance of you being rejected is like high, really, really high up there. So while we're on the plane, we're bouncing questions off each other, trying to get ready for the interview. And of course, we met founders from everywhere across the globe. People were solving really hard problems. Really, really hard problems. So the 10 minutes came. So, we went in for the interview. It felt like you just blinked your eye and it was over. Now, the format of the interview is this. So after the interview, you either get a phone call or you get an email. It's either one of those two things would happen. So if you get a phone call, it means that you got in. If you get an email, it means you didn't make the cut, right? So, it was like, it was really stressful, right? Waiting, So when we came back to the hotel room, we made sure the phones were charged, right? The laptop was on, and we're just looking at those both devices. We're asking ourselves, did we do well? Did we, second guessing each other? So when we kept waiting, an hour into the wait, the phone rang, and I just rushed. I just rushed to get it, and it was the Uber driver.
Oh my God.
So, it was tough, really, really, really tough. At some point, I think my co-founder slept off because he was tired, and I kept waiting, turning on the bed, and then I had a notification. It was an email. Oof. Remember, if you get an email, it means that you didn't get the cut, right? So I was distraught. So I couldn't even summon the courage to open it. I couldn't, because I already knew what the expectation was. I was just toying around, and then after 30 minutes, I just, let me open it. Let me just go and open it. So I opened the email, and it wasn't a rejection. It was, I think the email was we couldn't reach a decision today, but that they will reach a decision the next day.
Too much suspense. So you guys
Yeah, so okay, well, we still have a shot. I was I think it was the night of Hillary Trump election. I still remember that day. It was remarkable. The next day, they called us that we are in. And then that was the happiest news ever. It was the beginning of essentially properly building BuyPower as a company. It's really transformational.
Wow.
The sort of like experience you get in that place. I don't know if you have questions, but yeah. So eventually we got into the program. It was for 3 months. You had to raise money. You had to raise capital, actual capital. We eventually did. We raised capital in 7 digits in dollars, favorable terms. We came back to execute the BuyPower vision. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Please put your hands together for going through such a suspense-filled experience. So I want to take us back a bit to that 8 to 9 months that you were trying to figure out what was going on behind. What were some of the things that you did, so that these founders can maybe take some lessons out of that? How did you go about discovering what was going on back in, and what is it?
Yes.
What was it at that time?
So I think the first thing is you need to get very close to the problem, right? You need to be an expert at the problem. You have to figure out so in other words, what I had to solve for at that time was to get into the software unit of the company. I needed to get close to it. How can you solve from the outside? You need to know. So that means that I had to leverage people who knows. I know we went to a bunch of offices.
So software unit of Disco.
Of the Disco, yes.
Because that's Disco, is it a third party?
So the Disco is the distribution company, right? So if the energy company, which is the distribution company, was having a problem that I thought I could solve, then I had to get the ears or the eyes of the people that were managing their existing technology. Right?
Yeah.
So it was so that was, first of all, that was actually a business problem, not a technical problem. Because you have to leverage relationships, right? It's a social process. It's social, right? It's not technical yet, right? How do I do that? And first of all, you start from the closest ears around you, right? People in your professional network, or even outside of your professional network, could be in church, could be anywhere, right? Do you know someone here? Do you know someone there? Is it in your alumni association? Start trying to look up those networks to find out how to get very close to the problem. So that's the first thing. So it wasn't it was a defined path. I knew what I wanted. I needed to get to this thing, but I had to find a way to get to that team. So that was the first hurdle. When we eventually got to the team, the second part of it was, whoever was going to make that introduction needed to have enough credibility and social capital, right, with the person, right, so that they are comfortable enough to tell you about the problem. Part of the problem at the time was so they were using very legacy technologies, right, to power those systems, and so most of it was offline. You have a lot of network downtime. It was failing when customers were queuing, and it was that problem that we had to solve. So how do we rebuild a new technology? How do we develop a value proposition that is urgent and convincing enough for decision makers to buy in, right? So it was sort of navigating those steps. The part of building the application is the final part, right? The final way you build a product. But the handshake, the integration with the technology of the energy companies was a major difficulty that we had to solve for at the time.
And so it was a combination of relationships, right, and also technology building.
Yes, it was both of that, right? You had to, of course, I already had a technical background, right? So it means that I was experienced with technology, right? I was the chief technology officer of a company at the time. So it meant that I needed to understand the problem. It meant I had the skills and the competence to understand the technicality of the problem and figure out a way to solve for it. Right. My business partner is an exceptional salesman. Right. So so that sort of partnership worked for us. So one person solving for on the technical side, and then the other person solving for on the business side. So that's how we complement each other.
So at that time, you were not really thinking about business. You just wanted to solve this problem that was affecting you.
Yes, personally, and other people. Yeah, it was obvious, and this is Nigeria's capital, for God's sake, right? Like, I mean, why shouldn't we have that solution? That's what's like. Technology is only relevant if it creates value. It's improving the lives of people, in making things either easier, faster, or better for people. And that's what it is like. That's what makes technology meaningful. And I saw a problem within my environment that was obvious and urgent, and I tried to figure out a way to solve that problem.
And so that was like more or less like a partnership between. So at that time, right?
Yeah.
It was just like a one-time project with some royalties on the side, where they'll pay you, or you did it for free for them.
No, so the way we pitched it was different. So we sort of pitched it as, your customers are having this pain point. They have to queue, they don't have access to these tokens, and this is the major revenue driver for the energy company, right? When people don't have access, what happens is that they can go through any length, including energy theft, right? So, like, for instance, if you're a bad actor and you need electricity at 1 a.m. and you can't get it, like, you can bypass, right? And if you bypass, that's energy loss that's revenue loss for the disco. So essentially, we pitched it as our solution. It wasn't a one-off thing, so it was like an ongoing thing. We had to research a little bit about business models. And then we came up with an ongoing contract with those energy companies, where we get a piece of every vending that happens within our platform.
And that was how you were able to get them on board. So at the end of the day, for BuyPower, it was on the back end. Like, people are not seeing the back end of the handshakes.
No.
But the front end is like the technology and what everybody admires, right?
Yes. So that's one part. And again, at the beginning, like, of course, like, we discovered that the product was growing organically, right? It was growing organic. So because it was a pain point a lot of people had. It was driven majorly by referrals. What we put front and center in our strategy at that time was like, how do we obsess over the customer experience of the product, right? Like, how do we put customers front and center in since essentially, like, if customers are helping you drive the adoption of new users, it means that you're spending $0 on marketing. Yeah. Right, every business wants that, right, and that means that you can grow sustainably long term, right, without the injection of additional capital. So we put that at front and center. So what we used to do at that time was like, when a customer complains about an issue, we actually drive to the person's house, right? We drive to the person's house, because we wanted to experience the problem firsthand, right? Like, we did very crazy things in the beginning. Like, sometimes you go to these people's house, you're trying to help them solve a problem. Sometimes they will end up sending you on errands, right?
Because you guys were so young at that time.
Yeah, like, and you would do it, right? Because, like, you just wanted to, you're excited about, getting the customer happy. You wanted them to, like, you wanted to exceed the expectations of the product, right? And you wanted to create a simplified experience for customers. It was that drive to get the customers to say, wow, I've gotten more than I've expected. That's what kept us up at night, at the time. So it was really, really instrumental for how we grew from 0 users to over 5 million users, right? It was customers, right? Like, and even till this day, that's something that's still front and center in our strategy.
So let's talk about YC, right? You spent 3 months at YC. What were some of the lessons that you brought back to Abuja to implement, apart from the millions of dollars?
To build a successful business or startup, you have to do two things actually. You have to build a product or a service that customers want or love. And then the second thing is you have to find an efficient way to grow it, right? So you have to do those two things well, right? It sounds simple, but it can be complex, right? But those are the two things you need to do. One of the first things that YC taught us was like you have to understand the customer and the market, right? You have to understand the customer and the market. That sometimes that meant doing market research. Sometimes that meant doing things that don't scale, like going to people's houses and talking to people directly because you wanted to experience the problem firsthand. Essentially, you needed to be an expert at the problem that you were trying to solve, and you also had to figure out how to ask yourselves very, very hard questions about whatever assumptions you had about your business model. The second part that's really, really important is financial management, right? This is critical, highly critical for any business, regardless of whether you're a mom and pop store, or whether you're a traditional business or you're a startup. When you run out of cash, you're dead. Your business dies, right? And it's sort of surprising how a lot of founders don't pay attention to that. Because, of course, if you read the news, you see that a lot of startups have been going under lately. But as a founder, I believe that at the early stage there are 3 important metrics that you have to know as a startup founder, right? You have to put it front and center. It has to be like your Bible at the beginning. You have to know your bank account balance. Like, you have to know it actually. You have to know the money that is coming in, and then you have to know the money that is going out, right? So you see these 3 metrics, they are very foundational to the survival of your business long term. And what you use those metrics for is you use those metrics to calculate your burn, right? Your burn is the money going out of your business minus the money coming into the business. And then this important one, really, really important, is your runway, right? Your runway is the number of months you have until you run out of cash, until you die. Like literally every founder should know that, right? And then, of course, your growth rate. These are really important, not for investors. They're actually important for you to be honest and accountable to yourself, right? So it's not like you want to impress investors. You really want to know, what if I'm going to die in 6 months, what should I be doing right now, right? What should I be spending most of my time doing right now as the founder of the business? And so I was saying earlier to you is like, when you raise capital, that's something serious. That's a very serious thing if you raise capital. There's this wrong and flawed perception about capital. That investors don't give you money because they want you to flex, right? They give you money because they expect you to perform a miracle on that money, right? You're supposed to take that money, turn it around, and return 10x, 100x of that money, right? That's essentially the responsibility that you accept when you take money from investors, right? So that's a very serious thing. So it means that the way you spend money for your business, it's something that you have to be careful in your considerations, right? For instance, when you're doing a hire, like I was saying, when you're hiring anybody, you have to ask yourself every hire is like an investment. Like you're investing. And when you're an investor, what do you expect? Returns. Exactly. You expect a return. So if you're expecting a return on an investment, you make an hire into your business, you're spending money in that light, then for certain roles, it's very easy for you to know if you're getting a return. For instance, I give example like sales. Sales is straightforward. Like, if someone is either selling or they are not. The fundamentals is that as the CEO or the founder of a business, you have to figure out a way to ensure that everyone within your business is making the company more valuable. So that's the second thing is financial management. Financial management is really critical because if you don't get that, there's no way you can build a sustainable long-term business without understanding how to manage your finances. Some other things to think about are like strategic partnerships, right? Strategic partnerships. Before that, right, it's important for you to understand the platforms in your value chain. The evolving platforms within your value chain is really, really important. Platforms can exist upstream or downstream within your value chain. I'll explain. Let me just give you something practical that you understand. So if you look at the restaurant industry, for instance, right, downstream you have food delivery companies, right? Food delivery companies like DoorDash or Jumia Foods or whatever, right? And you also have restaurant online reservation services, right? Like Open Table, like that's in the US market. I don't even know what the equivalent is here. But now these are platforms that exist downstream within the restaurant industry. Now, these platforms charge a fixed monthly fee for their service with a commission on every reservation that's made. Now, if you combine that together, the sum of these fees for most restaurants accounts for almost 40% of the net profit of restaurants. So that means that I'm paying to be on Open Table, I'm paying to use DoorDash, and these platforms are taking 40% of my net revenue. Now, the question is why would you do business with someone that's taking 40% of your net income as a business? Why would you do that? And the reason why you would do that is basically because this platform have network effects. They've become dominant and they have leverage to the point that if you don't exist on those channels, you don't have access to customers. So if you were a restaurant business, say 10 years ago, and you knew that there's going to be DoorDash 10 years, what would you do in terms of strategy, right? So that's why it's important to think about the platforms that are evolving within your value chain. It will help you design strategies to mitigate future risk for your business, right? And so that's a very, very important lesson. Then I was talking about strategic partnerships. Strategic partnerships are very important for any business. It can help you scale really, really fast. And, that can happen either through co-marketing efforts or through technology integration or through distribution partnerships, right? You have to. So what happens is that the question is like, people ask is like, why should I collaborate with my competition, right? With my competitor? But you should actually. You should. For BuyPower today, name the top 10 biggest banks in Nigeria. They all use our service. All of them, right? They are partners. But in a sense, you can look at them also as competitors, right? But we are collaborating to jointly create value, and then we capture it in separate ways, that value that we both jointly create. So you have to think about strategic partnerships. They are really, really important for you to grow and to scale. I've run through a long list.
Let's talk about competition, right?
Okay.
BuyPower is not the only guy in the market. I mean, you were the only ones, and then more people are in the space. So how have you guys sort of maintained these, right, over the years?
Yes.
And be like the dominant guy.
Yeah. So that's
and you guys don't do a lot of marketing. I don't think I've seen a billboard of BuyPower before.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah. Again, like I said, it's like I think that there are different ways to look at competition, right? Yes, you have to pay close attention to competitors, but you have to pay greater attention to your strategy. Greater attention. So you have to craft your strategy. Like how are you going to win in the market, right? What are your areas of strength? What are the things that you do really, really well? If you were an underdog competing in a market where you have very dominant players, how would you outcompete, or how do you even survive in such a market? You can't compete on large fixed cost. So, for instance, like if you're a business that's just starting out, and you have a player that's well capitalized, that can spend, let's say 100 million on one ad, right? You can't do that. You can't do that because you don't have it, and it's not sustainable for you. And so you don't compete on large fixed costs. You have to figure out how to compete on variable cost, right? Cost that's variable, right? You have to figure out how. That's one way to compete. I'm not revealing BuyPower strategy. So I'm just saying this one way to compete, right? But like another way also is that often when you look at markets, there are always customer segments that are neglected by incumbents, right? Right. There are often customer segments that neglected by the big players, and that's really an opportunity. That's a calling for you as a startup. That's something that you can explore. Essentially, all financial success is built by creating value, right? That's how all financial success is built. And so the question now becomes, how do you want to compete in terms of value creation? The thing is that you can't do everything. You can't do everything. You can't create all the value that's possible within the market. So you have to choose which area you want to out-compete, right? And so essentially, you have sometimes, people use tools like value maps where you basically define your value drivers, the things that are driving value for your customers, right? There's a concept called willingness to pay, which is the maximum amount a customer is willing to pay for any product or service. Most of the job that you have to do when you want to create value is to figure out how to increase a customer's willingness to pay for a product or a service, right? It has to. You have to figure it out. Like, what sort of activities, what sort of initiatives will drive your WTP. Once willingness to pay goes up, you create value for the customers. It's that you're making something faster, you're making it cheaper, you're making it less expensive. Like, you are driving value. And WTP, willingness to pay for a product or service, is typically influenced by a lot of factors, many considerations. It could be, value perception, how customers perceive. So if I ask you guys today, let me give an example. If I were to ask you guys today that how many people do life insurance in Nigeria, for instance? So there is a perception that life insurance is expensive, right? It's a perception, but it's not true. But it's not true. But it's not true. But it's a perception, right? And so sometimes the willingness to pay for something can be influenced by factors that are not necessarily the truth, but they're just social perceptions. So they're not factual, but that's what it is. Essentially, it's like you have to try to hone your strategy as a business and figure out like what you should be doing to remain long term within that market and dominate it. Strategic partnerships is like you should if you don't take anything from this session, you should figure out a way to do that. It's going to make you scale a lot faster.
And you're right. So I'm going to go into Q&A where you get to ask your questions. But I have two questions for you, Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
A day in your life in 2016 versus a day in your life in 2024. What does that look like?
Can I just pick any day?
Yeah,
any day in 2016.
2016.
Okay, so in 2016, I think I was really invested in building this side project, right? First of all, I know that there was one time that me and my co-founder were just trying to experiment with different names. What should we call it? We said something like BuyLight, right? Like it was just all random names that we were playing with at the time. So what happened then was that 9 to 5. It wasn't 9 to 5 because like the way I worked then was like most times I was sleeping in the office. Right, I was sleeping in the office because like I work overtime. I had to make sure that I meet deadlines. If I have a weak link within my team, sometimes I roll up my sleeve and I get that job done. It was a stressful. It's still stressful. I mean, like I wouldn't say it gets better over time, but it was stressful. So it was putting my efforts in. Working for my employer, and then working on the side projects, right, which was BuyPower at the time. It was mainly really coding. That's literally what I was doing. I was coding. I was researching. I was setting projects, goals, and trying to figure out how to execute. So it was really management work. I was doing the work of a manager and an individual contributor. So a manager is like, management is about getting work done through other people, right? So that's what management is. It's like essentially the performance of a manager is the collective output of the people that work for them, right? So it was like about making sure that like I was managing the team right. We were achieving the clear goals. So whenever, like I always tell my team, it's like, how do all accomplishment in this world start? All accomplishments in this world start by setting goals and expectations, right? That's how you have to set, that's the beginning of implementation. That's the starting point of implementation. So you have to be really, really clear and invest time in trying to understand what you're trying to achieve, right? So it was like managing the team, and then rolling my sleeves in there and trying to work on the code. That was 2016. It was very stressful, falling sick all the time, breaking down because of the stress. Right now, yeah.
1024.
Okay, so it's a lot complex. It's more complex because so what most people know about BuyPower is electricity payment services. We are way beyond that, right? We are way beyond that. We acquired a startup in December? Yeah, we acquired a startup in December, and we have a microfinance bank, and we have a few other verticals that we
How did you
execute.
get to microfinance bank?
So the team is kind of large, like north of 200 people, right? So that's a lot to manage. That's a lot to manage, right? Because electricity is just one form of bill payment. It's not the only form of bill payment, and the goal of BuyPower is to simplify bill payment for African businesses and individuals. In spite of the advancement in digital payment technologies, bill payment is still very manual and highly inefficient in a lot of industries. Right, trying to take on that problem across different sectors and geographies is kind of like.
So at first it was just let's do this AEDC project, but now it's like let's solve bill payments for Africa.
Yes, so because you can look at if you practical examples of the inefficiencies. If you look at in the healthcare industry, there's still a lot of manual data entry and paper-based processes, right, within hospitals. If you look at somewhere like real estate and property, rental collection is manual, the tracking, it's still all of these inefficiencies that are across different industries and sectors, and it's going to take a lot of effort to sort of solve that problem.
So would you call yourself like a fintech now?
So the reason why you have a bank is because it's sort of backward integration, because we do process payments, right? Most businesses process payments, right? And when you grow, you get to a certain scale, you want to have better control, right, in terms of the infrastructures that you depend on, right? And so you start vertical integration for your business, right? You sort of take this part of your business, tear it apart, and see, and again, it could also be improved margins too. And one of the things that we suffered when we started out was the fact that because fintech margins are very tiny, right? Fintech margins are really tiny, and most times founders in their early stage don't have a lot of leverage to negotiate pricing with big payment platforms, right? Because you're not pushing numbers, you're not pushing volumes at that stage, and so one of the goals for us, especially in this harsh, macro environment, is to figure out how can we help founders to keep a little bit of more of their margins, right, when they process payments. How can we give them more cost-effective pricing for their businesses, because they have to keep more if they have to survive. And so the microfinance bank is not just for BuyPower, it's also a way of trying to give back to people that are just starting out.
Wow. So at this point now, you have different revenue channels and sources, like an octopus all around the entire sector, but you still not call yourself a fintech.
Yeah, in a way that you will, because the bank is regulated by the central bank.
Okay.
It's regulated by the central bank. So but we're trying to, for me, it was, again, like our mission is about bill payment, really. It's really about, trying to figure out how we can make these processes more efficient for businesses, right? Because like businesses still have a lot of like very manual processes too. Like it was something we experienced when we're scaling, whether it's invoices that you're getting from different vendors, if you have to do a lot of payouts, or if you have to deal with things like approvals, like you have to get approvals from this manager, it has to go to finance, it has to go through, like a lot of these processes can be cumbersome for businesses. So we are all about trying to introduce sanity and streamline the operations of all these businesses. So it's really about making sure that bill pay is as efficient as it needs to be for businesses and individuals.
Interesting. But I think I just like the fact that you started with one thing and now you've grown into like multiple things. Please put your hands together for Benjamin. This has been a really, really insightful session.
Thank you.
I mean, for you to come out and really share the backstory behind BuyPower and also share a lot of advice, that's really, really, really great of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
And I want to recognize two key stakeholders that made it possible for us to have Founders Corner. The first is M-Switch. We are currently using their space. As you can see, it's a nice studio based in Abuja. So if you're looking for a place to do your recording, make sure you come to M-Switch. And second is Ventures Valley. Ventures Valley is a YouTube platform that hosts a number of key entrepreneurs out of Nigeria, out of Africa, and be able to draw out their stories. So we've collaborated with them to be able to get the stories from Founders Friday to their audience as well as to more people around the world. So thank you, Ventures Valley and M-Switch, for making Founders Corner possible. And thank you, Benjamin, for showing up. We truly, 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 truly appreciate you. Please put your hands together for him once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
And it's a wrap.
Thank
you.
Thank you, guys.